Ukraine's top prosecutor is preparing to try dozens of suspected Russian war criminals, with hundreds more suspects under investigation. She says the list includes senior military officers, politicians and propaganda agents. Some trials have already begun thanks to meticulous documentation on the ground. But investigating potential war crimes could prove difficult as Russia controls more territory. A warning that our next report contains some disturbing images.
Images that no one should have to see. Civilians strewn across a street in Bucha. The immediate aftermath of a strike on a maternity hospital in Mariupol. A mass grave holding the unidentified bodies of fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, grandparents and children. After Ukrainian fighters pushed Russian forces back from towns and villages they'd occupied, evidence of atrocities began to pile up. All being documented by human rights groups, Ukrainian officials and journalists on the ground. Now, almost 2 months later, Ukraine's Prosecutor General says investigations are underway into well over 10,000 suspected war crimes, ranging from pillaging and looting, rape and summary execution, to indiscriminate bombing of civilian infrastructure. The first war crimes trial concluded last week, resulting in a guilty verdict for a 21-year-old Russian soldier charged with shooting an unarmed Ukrainian man. But in the eastern Donbas region, where the war is still being fought, tracking down evidence and prosecuting potential war crimes could prove a lot more difficult. In the southern city of Mariupol, aerial pictures showed the word children daubed outside the theatre building that was hit by Russian airstrikes in March. An Associated Press investigation suggests as many as 600 people may have been killed there as they sought shelter. Ukraine says Russia knew it was a civilian target. Now Mariupol is in Russian hands, and an independent investigation at the site has been impossible. Exactly who and how many people died there may never be known. In April, satellite images showed apparent mass graves near the city. Local officials say up to 9,000 bodies could be buried there, victims of Russian aggression, they say. Now, Russia is focusing its assault on the Luhansk region. The fear is if more towns and cities fall under Russian control, the harder it will become to investigate potential war crimes and hold anyone there to account.
We're joined now by our correspondent Terry Schultz in The Hague. Terry, what's the latest from Ukraine's chief prosecutor?
I had the chance to speak with Ukraine's Prosecutor General Irina Venediktova after a press conference today here at Eurojust, which is the European Union's judicial cooperation agency, also attended by the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court and other national prosecutors from countries that are helping Ukraine. And the prosecutor from Ukraine said it is so important for her country, for the citizens, the people who are suffering those crimes we've just seen in that piece, that she is able to provide accountability, that somebody is seen to be paying for these crimes. And we don't know yet how many of those crimes are going to be crimes against humanity, whether they'll ever get to any indictments on genocide. But she explained why it's important to move forward quickly. Let's hear what she had to say.
I think not only my main goal, it's the main goal of all civilized world, of all people who speak about rule of law, about justice, about international law, that people who are responsible of deaths of other people, who is responsible of crime of aggression, who just came to the neighbor states, just take their land and kill their people, actually they should be punished. I think it's very important that after such situation in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria, now we have so huge and aggressive and brutal war in Ukraine, maybe it's time to not only to stop this war, not only to punish people who are responsible, but actually to prevent such situation in the future.
Ukraine's chief prosecutor, Terry, I wonder, did you get a sense how this investigation compares to other war crimes trials?
Well, certainly, and there are multiple investigations at different levels in different jurisdictions, and that what was so remarkable about today here at Eurojust, a press conference with multiple prosecutors all working on the same investigation, all trying to bring Russian President Vladimir Putin and his henchmen, the people around him who are making these decisions every day to kill Ukrainians and to maim them and to ruin their cities, that they are eventually brought to justice. And that's what the prosecutor was talking about, how every day she's going out and gathering evidence from scenes that continue to be, in the middle of a war zone. So it will take time, and it is difficult. And, this will definitely slow down some of the investigation from some of the worst scenes that you saw there in that piece. But they are all determined to do this on various levels, at the local level in Ukraine, at the International Criminal Court, in various European capitals which have joined this joint investigation. So we're going to see a lot of prosecutions in a lot of different jurisdictions, a lot of different courts.
Just quickly, Terry, even with that cooperation, even with that determination, how hard is it going to be to hold alleged war criminals accountable here?
To prove war crimes, to prove atrocity crimes, genocide as one of the most difficult, it takes years, even decades, as we've seen at the International Criminal Court. But Ukraine has already shown it's going to move ahead quickly. There's already been some prosecutions, some convictions of people who have fired on civilians, killed civilians on the ground there in Ukraine. So I think it will be step by step up to the highest level of war crimes. But Ukraine has already made a lot of progress and is moving very quickly.
Terry Schultz in The Hague, thank you.
We are now joined by our regular military analyst, Frank Ledwidge, from Oxford in the UK. Frank, the fight for Severodonetsk has been described as a race against time for the Kremlin. Why the rush?
Well, good morning, Gerhard. Russia is still, believe it or not, a peacetime army. So their manning situation is of a peacetime is a peacetime army. So they add to that the fact that they're caught out by corruption, casualties, and a lack of morale. They cannot sustain the momentum very much longer. Now, to be fair to the Russian army, that they've gone on so long at such intensity is a real credit, but they simply cannot sustain that. Add into that the factor of some Western weapons getting through, then you have, if not a time limit, then you have an operational limit on what can be achieved for what amounts to, frankly, a very limited success.
So speaking about Western weapons deliveries, as we heard in that report earlier, US President Biden appears to have put a damper on Ukrainian hopes of getting heavier weapons soon, saying Washington will not deliver long-range rocket systems. What do you make of that, and how big of a blow is this for Ukraine?
Gerhard, we can compare this to the MiGs decision back in February, only this is far more important. This is an artillery war. The only chance the Ukrainians have of holding the Russians back is by matching them in artillery, and they're unlikely to be able to do that without those Western supplies. The long-range rocket systems are absolutely critical for the Ukrainians to be able to challenge Russian supply lines. This is a political, not a military decision. And as a political decision, it's deeply flawed. The idea that there's a difference implied in Biden's quote there that we heard before between defensive and offensive weapons is absolutely false. This is a decision that's going to cost lives and cost land for the Ukrainians, which they'll have to spend in even greater quantities to retake the land they're going to lose. It's a deeply short-sighted decision.
You just said that this is an artillery war, but it seems to me that one of the more overlooked aspects of the fighting is the naval front. The fight for sea lanes has become increasingly important, though, for Kiev, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And we've heard little flashes of this, of course, with the sinking of the Moskva and the various battles for Snake Island in the last few weeks, which The Ukrainians seem to have lost. The Russians have taken the island, not surprisingly. But all those battles, the Moskva, Snake Island, the attacks on Russian frigates and so forth and other patrol boats, they're all in support of the idea of taking back or at least challenging for control of those sea lanes. Now, Deutsche Welle yesterday is one of very few agencies, and I really give credit for this, to point out that Lithuania, which has always been very forward-leaning in this war, has proposed that at least NATO, or probably more workably an international coalition, convoy vehicles in and out of the port of Odessa. Now, the reason for that is military, obviously. It's a challenge for that control, but that's secondary. Here's the political problem. Ukraine is looking at a situation where if it fails to provide that entry to the sea, it's a mercantile nation. It's looking at being a landlocked state which cannot get its exports, particularly food, out. And a landlocked, failing state with a big army in the medium term is not viable. It's not viable for itself, and it's not viable, of course, for any form of European security in the longer term. It's absolutely vital, this. Admiral Stavridis, who used to be Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, said that this was just as important as Western supplies coming in from the West, this being forcing an entry or supporting an entry into Odessa. And I think over the next few weeks, what we're going to see is that front, the naval front, becoming ever more important, Gerhard.
Our military analyst, Frank Ledwidge there. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Gerhard.